Hey everyone, and welcome to our deep dive into AI in higher education.
Yeah.
You've sent over some really cool stuff,
Yeah.
including pieces from this book, Generative AI in Higher Education.
Yeah, it's a good one.
Looks like you're really digging into this, and honestly, so am I.
Mhm.
Um, the big question that keeps popping up, and it's kind of in all these sources,
Right.
is whether professors
Right.
are going to be replaced by robots.
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And the book really emphasizes how fast this field is changing. Like the author even mentions in the prologue how they had to constantly update the chapters as they were writing because new AI developments kept popping up.
It's crazy to think about, like, the book was outdated before it even hit the shelves.
Right.
It definitely feels like AI is everywhere these days.
Yeah.
But before we get too far, can we break down what we even mean by AI?
Absolutely. The book does a great job of laying out three types: ANI, AGI, and ASI.
Okay.
It can get a little confusing,
Yeah.
so let's try to untangle them.
Okay, I'm all ears. Let's start with ANI. That one sounds kind of familiar.
Mhm.
Is that what we see in most apps today?
You got ANI is like a specialist.
Yeah.
Really good at one specific task. Think of it like the facial recognition on your phone or those algorithms that suggest what to watch next on streaming services.
Right.
They're all powered by ANI working behind the scenes in ways you probably interact with every single day.
Okay, that makes sense. But what about AGI and ASI?
Right.
Those sound a bit more like science fiction to me.
Now, when the book talks about AGI and ASI, that's where things get really mind-bending.
Okay.
AGI is like the ultimate goal, an AI that can learn and perform any intellectual task that a human can.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just about being good at one thing. It's about having general intelligence like us.
So could an AGI write a novel, compose a symphony A&D, solve complex mathematical problems all in a day's work?
Theoretically, yes.
Hmm.
But the reality is we're not there yet. AGI is still largely theoretical. And then there's ASI, which goes even further. ASI would surpass human capabilities in every way. Think superintelligence beyond anything we can even imagine right now.
Okay, so AGI is like a really smart student who aces every subject, and ASI is like, I don't know, some kind of all-knowing super being. That's a little intimidating.
It is pretty wild to think about.
Yeah,
And it raises a lot of questions about the future of, well, everything.
right.
But for now, both AGI and ASI are more in the realm of possibility than reality.
Right, so we're not handing over the reins to our robot overlords just yet.
Not yet.
But the book does make a point about big data and the Internet of Things being fuel for AI's growth.
Yes.
Is that why AI seems to be developing so quickly? Because we're generating so much data all the time?
Exactly. The more data we generate, the more these systems have to learn from.
Yeah.
It's like feeding a brain with information. The bigger the meal, the more it grows and develops. And with the Internet of Things, we're talking about a constant stream of data from all these interconnected devices, smartphones, smart homes, wearables, you name it.
So it's like we're creating this massive digital buffet for AI to feast on.
Yes.
No wonder it's getting so powerful so quickly. But let's talk about GenAI for a second. It seems like everyone's buzzing about it.
Yeah.
How does GenAI fit into all this?
GenAI is like the rock star of the AI world right now because it can create things, text, images, even code.
Okay.
It's mind-blowing. And we're not just talking about some far-off possibility. We're talking about tools you've probably heard of or even used yourself. ChatGPT, DALL-E, Stable Diffusion.
Okay. Yeah, those names are definitely ringing a bell, but how does it actually work?
Right.
It sounds almost magical.
It is based on some pretty complex stuff.
Mm-hmm.
The key is deep neural networks, or DNNs for short. They're inspired by how the human brain works.
Oh.
Basically, these networks process huge amounts of data, finding patterns in relationships, and then use that knowledge to generate new content.
So it's like a super-powered brain that can learn from everything it's exposed to. That's pretty incredible. But since we're focusing on higher education, let's dive into ChatGPT, because that's the one that seems to be making waves in academia.
Absolutely. And what's fascinating is that ChatGPT isn't just a novelty. It's showing real potential as a teaching and learning tool.
Oh.
The book has some really interesting case studies, like students using ChatGPT to practice their French and even get feedback on their progress.
Huh.
It's like having a personal language tutor available 24/7.
That's really neat. But I'm also wondering, couldn't that lead to students becoming too reliant on the AI and not actually developing their own language skills?
That's a valid concern, and it's something educators are grappling with. The key is finding the right balance, using AI as a tool to enhance learning without replacing the human element.
Okay, so it's all about using AI strategically, not just letting it take over completely.
Right.
But what about other applications of ChatGPT in education? The book mentions some pretty cool stuff.
Oh, there are tons. For example, the book talks about architecture students collaborating with ChatGPT to create realistic designs,
Oh,
like having an AI design partner.
wait, hold on. You're saying architecture students are using ChatGPT to design buildings?
Yeah.
Wouldn't that require a deep understanding of structural engineering and building codes, things an AI might not fully grasp?
That's where the collaboration comes in.
Yeah.
It's not about the AI designing the building on its own. It's about students using the AI as a tool to explore different design possibilities,
Yeah.
test out ideas, and get instant feedback.
Oh, okay.
It can really speed up the creative process.
Okay, that makes more sense. So it's more like a brainstorming partner helping students think outside the box and push the boundaries of design.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And this type of collaboration isn't limited to architecture. The book also talks about ChatGPT being used to simulate patient interactions for medical students.
So it's like a virtual patient that can practice their bedside manner on that sounds way less intimidating than interacting with real patients, especially early in their training.
Exactly. It gives them a safe space to practice their skills, test out different approaches, and get feedback without the pressure of real-world consequences.
Wow. The possibilities seem endless, but I know there are concerns about AI in education too. The book touches on things like bias plagiarism and the fear that students will lose critical thinking skills if AI does all the heavy lifting.
Absolutely. We need to approach these tools with a balanced perspective. They have incredible potential, but it's crucial to think critically about their limitations and potential risks.
Right. It's like with any new technology, there's always a learning curve and a need to figure out the best way to use it responsibly.
Exactly, and that's why it's so important to have these conversations to explore the potential benefits and challenges of AI in education.
Well, I'm definitely feeling more informed already, but this deep dive is just getting started. There's so much more to explore in these sources you've sent over. What do you say we take a closer look at how AI is shaping educational policies around the world?
Let's do it. The book actually has a whole section on AI policy in higher education, and it's pretty fascinating to see how different countries are approaching this.
I'm ready to dive in.
It really is a global conversation, and there's no one-size-fits-all approach. For instance, the EU is taking a risk-based model carefully, looking at how AI could impact different sectors, including education.
So they're being pretty cautious, wanting to understand the potential downsides before diving in headfirst makes sense. What about other parts of the world?
Well, the U.S. is taking more of a wait-and-see approach. They're focusing on fostering innovation while keeping an eye on how things develop. It's a bit more hands-off compared to the EU.
Interesting. It seems like every country has its own unique perspective on this. The book mentioned China too, right?
Yes, China's really emphasizing national security when it comes to AI. They're investing heavily in AI research and development, but they're also putting in place strict regulations to control how AI is used.
So how does all this impact someone like me learning and working in a world where everything is so interconnected? Does it even matter what individual countries decide if AI is developing globally anyway?
That's a great question. These policies and regulations have ripple effects on everything from academic research to the development of new AI technologies. Imagine a world where data privacy laws are vastly different between countries that could impact international collaborations, data sharing, and even how AI is used in educational settings. It's a complex landscape to navigate.
Okay, so even though AI development is happening globally, the rules of the game are still being figured out on a country-by-country basis. It's like trying to solve a puzzle where the pieces keep changing shape.
That's a great analogy. And speaking of navigating this complexity, the book proposes something called the AI Ecological Education Policy Framework.
That sounds pretty intense. What is that all about?
It sounds complicated, but it's actually a really interesting way of thinking about how to approach AI in higher education. And what's cool about this framework is that it goes beyond just the technology itself. It looks at governance, operational, and pedagogical dimensions.
Okay, break that down for me. What do those dimensions actually mean in a real-world setting?
Think of it like building a house.
Yeah.
You need a solid foundation. Governance, the right tools and materials, operational, and a clear vision of what you want to create, pedagogical.
Okay, I can see how that analogy works. So for the foundation, the governance part, what would that look like for universities dealing with AI?
For governance, universities need to establish clear guidelines on academic integrity, especially with AI tools becoming more common. How do we prevent plagiarism when students can use AI to generate text? How do we ensure that everyone has equal access to these resources? These are key questions that need answers.
It's like we need a whole new set of rules for the AI age. And what about the operational side of things? What kind of tools and support would universities need to implement AI effectively?
Universities need to invest in training for both students and faculty on AI literacy. It's not enough to just have the tools we need to know how to use them effectively and ethically. This could mean workshops on prompt engineering or courses on data ethics. These are going to be essential skills in an AI-powered world.
So it's not just about teaching students how to use AI, but also teaching the teachers. Makes sense, we can't expect educators to integrate AI into their classrooms if they don't understand it themselves. But what about the pedagogical dimension, the vision part? How does that fit into all of this?
That's where we get into the heart of teaching and learning. The pedagogical dimension is all about rethinking how we teach and assess learning in the age of AI. For example, if students can use GenAI to write essays, how do we assess their true understanding of a topic?
That's a huge question. It's like the whole game has changed and we're still trying to figure out the new rules. So what are some of the solutions the book proposes?
The book suggests some pretty innovative approaches. One is to move away from traditional exams and essays and embrace more authentic assessments. Think project-based learning, where AI is a tool, not a shortcut, or presentations where students have to demonstrate their understanding in a more dynamic way.
So it's about showing not just writing about it. I like that. But how can we be sure students are really using AI as a tool and not just letting it do all the work?
That's where the design of the assessments comes in the book. It emphasizes the importance of designing tasks that require critical thinking, problem solving, and creativity, things that AI can assist with but can't completely replace.
So, for example, instead of asking students to write a standard research paper, you might have them use AI to gather information and then synthesize that information into a multimedia presentation where they have to make connections, draw conclusions, and present their findings in a compelling way.
Exactly. It's about using AI to enhance the learning process, not replace it. And that brings us to another important concept that the book dives into: prompt engineering.
Okay, I've heard that term thrown around, but I'm not entirely sure what it means. Can you break it down for me?
Prompt engineering is all about learning how to effectively communicate with AI systems, especially those like ChatGPT. It's about crafting clear, specific, and well-structured prompts that get you the kind of response you're looking for from the AI.
So it's not just about typing in any old question. It's about understanding how the AI thinks and tailoring your language accordingly.
Exactly. It's a bit like learning a new language. But in this case, the language is one that allows you to communicate with AI. And as these tools become more common, prompt engineering is becoming an increasingly valuable skill across a wide range of fields.
So if you want to get the most out of these AI tools, you need to learn how to speak their language. That's fascinating. The book even breaks down the different components of an effective prompt, like the instruction, the context, the role, the format. It's pretty detailed.
It is. And it's both a technical skill and an art form. You need to understand how the AI works, but you also need to be creative and experiment to see what works best.
It's like becoming an AI whisperer, someone who can coax the best possible responses from these powerful tools. But with all this talk about AI, it's easy to get caught up in the technology and forget about the human side of education.
You're so right. And the book really emphasizes that throughout AI is a powerful tool, but it should be used to empower humans, not replace them.
So how do we make sure that AI doesn't dehumanize education, but actually enhances it? It feels like a balancing act, harnessing the power of AI while preserving those human connections that are so essential to learning.
It is a balancing act, and it's a conversation we need to keep having. The choices we make now will have a huge impact on the future of education.
It's a lot to think about, but I have to say I'm really intrigued by the potential of AI to make education more equitable and accessible. The book touched on that, right?
Absolutely. AI has the potential to level the playing field in many ways. For example, AI tools can personalize learning, providing customized instruction and support tailored to each student's needs.
So instead of a one-size-fits-all approach, every student gets an education that's tailored to their individual strengths and weaknesses. That's pretty powerful.
It is, and it can be especially beneficial for students who might struggle in a traditional classroom setting. AI tutors can provide individualized support, helping students master concepts at their own pace.
I can also see how AI could help bridge the gap for students who don't have access to traditional educational resources.
Mm,
Imagine if every student, regardless of their location or socioeconomic background, had access to high-quality AI-powered learning tools.
exactly. It could revolutionize education, making learning more accessible and equitable for everyone. But we also need to be mindful of the potential downsides.
Like what?
Well, how do we ensure that AI tools are designed and implemented in a way that doesn't perpetuate existing biases or create new ones? It's something we need to be very careful about.
That's a really important point. We can't just assume that AI will automatically be fair and impartial. We need to be constantly questioning our assumptions, challenging the status quo, and making sure that AI is being used to create a more just and equitable world.
Absolutely. It's about using AI to amplify human potential, not diminish it.
Well said. Okay, we've covered a lot of ground here, from AI policies to prompt engineering, from equity and access to the human element of education. It's clear that AI is having a profound impact on higher education, and it's only going to become more influential in the years to come.
It's definitely a rapidly evolving landscape, and it's exciting to be part of this conversation. But before we get too carried away with the possibilities, let's take a step back and look at the technical side of how these powerful AI tools are actually built.
You mean, like, how do they actually work under the hood? I'm game. I always find that stuff fascinating.
Great. I think you'll find this part particularly interesting. It involves those deep neural networks we talked about earlier, but we'll dive a little deeper into how they're used to create Gen AI.
All right, let's get technical. Remind me again, what are deep neural networks? I know the book mentioned them, but it's all a bit fuzzy now.
Think of them as the engine under the hood of Gen AI. Imagine a massive network of interconnected mini-brains, each specializing in a tiny aspect of the data. When you feed the network tons of information, these mini-brains work together, adjusting their connections to learn the patterns within it.
So it's not just one big computer crunching numbers, it's more like a team of specialists, each contributing their expertise to the overall understanding.
That's a great way to visualize it, and that's how a system like ChatGPT can go from a jumble of text to actually understanding human language and even generating creative content.
Okay, I'm starting to get the picture, but how do you actually build one of these Gen AI models? Where do you even begin?
Well, the first step is gathering massive amounts of data. We're talking text, images, code, really anything the model needs to learn from, and the more data, the better.
The book mentions some specific data sets, right? There's one called C4, which was like a giant collection of text scraped from the internet.
Right, and another called LAION5B, which is even bigger and includes billions of image-text pairs. These datasets are the foundation of the whole learning process.
So it's like feeding the AI a massive digital library, letting it absorb all that information.
Exactly, and once the model has all this data, we move on to the training process. It's like sending the model to a digital boot camp, where it learns to identify patterns and relationships within the data.
So if it's being trained on a text data set, it's figuring out things like grammar, syntax, even the nuances of human language.
Precisely. It's learning by example, essentially.
Right.
And during this training, a technique called backpropagation comes into play.
Okay, back propagation. That sounds intense. Break it down for me, what's actually happening there.
It's a way of fine-tuning the connections between those mini-brains we talked about. The model makes predictions based on the data and then gets feedback on how accurate those predictions are. Backpropagation uses that feedback to adjust the connections so the model gets better and better over time.
So it's like the model is constantly being tested and corrected, refining its understanding with each round of training.
Exactly. And this training can take a long time, sometimes weeks or even months, depending on the size and complexity of the model. But once it's done, we need to see how well the model actually performs.
That's where those standardized benchmarks come in, right? The book mentioned those.
Right. It's like giving the model a series of exams to see what it's learned. There are benchmarks for things like common sense reasoning, question answering language, understanding, even code generation.
So you can really put these models through their paces, see how they stack up against each other.
Exactly. And the results help researchers compare different models, figure out areas for improvement, and make sure the model is performing at a high level.
Okay, so the model's been trained past its exams. What happens next?
Well, in many cases, we do something called fine-tuning. It's like additional training that's more specific to a particular task or application.
So if you wanted a model for, say, chat-based customer service, you'd fine-tune it on data related to customer interactions.
Precisely. Fine-tuning helps optimize the model for its intended use case.
And then finally, it's ready to be released into the wild.
Almost. There are a few more technical steps, like optimizing the model for efficiency and making sure it can easily integrate with other software. But essentially, yes. Once those steps are done, the model is ready to be used in real-world applications.
Wow. This whole process is incredibly complex. It's amazing to think about all the work that goes into creating these tools.
It is, and it's a field that's constantly evolving with new techniques and approaches emerging all the time. It's really an exciting time to be involved in AI.
Well, this deep dive has definitely given me a new appreciation for the technology behind Gen AI. But as cool as all this is, I keep coming back to the human side of it all.
I completely agree. At the end of the day, education is about people, about fostering growth and curiosity.
Exactly. And I think that's what makes this whole conversation about AI so interesting and important. We need to figure out how to use these powerful tools in a way that enhances human learning, not diminishes it.
Beautifully said. It's about finding that balance, using AI to empower and inspire while preserving the irreplaceable qualities that make us human.
Well, this has been an incredible journey. Thanks so much for walking me through all this. I feel like I've learned a ton.
It's been my pleasure.
Oh,
These conversations are always so stimulating.
and to our listener, thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you've gained some new insights and feel inspired to continue exploring the ever-evolving world of AI in higher education. Until next time.